And I jumped out of the way. I said, oh my God, this plane's going to crash.
This thing came right across, north to south.
Incidentally, I was a private pilot, so I have some familiarity with the airspace.
It glided over my house, and there was absolutely no noise.
What I thought to be a kind of a boomerang shape.
Myself, my God, that's a wingspan. I've never seen anything like that.
They were reported by at least one commercial airline pilot.
It was humongous, that's all I can say.
It passed right in front of us, just about right above eye's length.
I don't hear anything, do you?
No, I don't hear anything. What in the hell is that?
It's wide.
I came out second after Monica, and I remember looking at it. It was coming over the mountain, and it was like almost as wide as one of the humps. And it was very low.
It's coming across the sky, and as it's moving, it's blocking and unblocking the stars. There's actually a shape.
It was more like a boomerang than like a straight V, and then the lights were spaced pretty evenly.
It was actually 5 lights that were a V, 1 in front and 2 on each side, and it was perfect. It was a perfect triangle.
If you can imagine something the size of Camelback Mountain floating down Scottsdale Road, you have some idea of the intensity of this thing.
The object we saw, if we opened up a newspaper, you could not block out the object that we saw.
People say, Mike, now you saw a B-2 bomber. My response was, we could land all 40 of our B-2 bombers on the wing of that craft.
You know, it's one of the biggest things I've ever seen that moved like that. I mean, it was just enormous.
It happened last night, and eyewitnesses who saw it say it's like nothing they've ever seen before.
I don't know if it was as big as an aircraft carrier. It might have been. Because I've never seen an aircraft carrier fly.
It barely missed that mountain.
Really?
Yeah, came floating over the mountain.
So had you not looked up, you wouldn't have known it was
No,
there.
my daughter, it was 8:30 at night. My daughter was coming over here, and she ran in and said, Mom, you have got to see this. So we all...
There was such an uproar about what people described seeing that we also did a story about it back in 1997.
The first report of a strange flying object came at about 8:20 that night from a former police officer in Paulden, Arizona. Over the next 40 minutes, people gave similar reports of an object along a 200-mile route south to Phoenix and Tucson.
It was gunmetal black. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't invisible. It was more of a dull, bluish black color.
And we both just stayed there and looked at it for a couple minutes, and it was completely silent.
When you look down the street on a hot day in Phoenix, above the street's like it's really wavy, and you see everything kind of distorted, and that's what it looked like up inside the middle of the craft.
It was just gliding, and then it stopped, and then it like the sides retracted a little, and then it was gone.
Just went.
Acceleration to deceleration, it was no noise the whole time.
And not a sound.
Explanations have been tossed about that there were flares, that there were planes flying in formation. But Mark and Robin, we checked with the FAA today, we checked with Sky Harbor, and we checked with Luke Air Force Base, and there's been no official explanation of those strange bright lights last night.
Well, I'm going to order a whole, investigation of this through DPS. We're going to make all the necessary inquiries, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to find out if it was a UFO.
I'm Patty Kirkpatrick. Remember those mysterious lights in the sky? Well, the governor says there are new leads in the case. Good evening, Arizona. The governor is holding a news conference on the lights in the sky over Phoenix in March. Let's listen in.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please. It's, Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
I think what really irritated me was the joke the governor pulled with the Martian. I just didn't have time for that kind of stuff.
He was just dismissing everything that these people had seen and said, just like we're all Looney Tunes.
And I know what I saw, and that's not what you're telling me what I saw. I didn't see flares. I didn't see A-10 Warthog. So how about we work together and try to figure out what this thing is? So when you hear someone says they saw a UFO, you think they're crazy?
Yes, I think they're crazy, yes.
What puzzles me is why people laugh at the subject of UFOs, but when the laughter stops, everyone secretly wants to know, are they real?
You see that now? See a big one? See it going? Do you see it? See what this?
I don't know if I want to know if UFOs are real, because then that raises a lot of other issues. Who are they? Why are they here? Are they going to hurt me? Do they have chocolate?
When I told my father I wanted to make a documentary about UFOs, he said I was crazy. In fact, my whole family did. And 95% of the time, this stuff is crazy. But the remaining 5%, that is what keeps me going.
This man in the saucer, can you describe him?
What year was this taken, do you know? I'm James Fox, and I've been curious about UFOs for a long time.
And if you look down at the very bottom, there's the little disc.
Very curious.
Look at that.
Evidently, the Air Force is curious too.
In pursuit of this obligation,
And in 1952, they admitted it.
we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports. There have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
All blacked out?
Wonder what was under there.
With the help of investigative reporter Leslie Kane, I decided to put together some of the best witnesses from around the world for this film.
Almost 10 years after the termination of Project Blue Book.
The cases and photographs you are about to see represent some of the best evidence that UFOs are real.
Objects of unknown origin, what were they after?
The beam of light that came down at our feet.
Ms. James?
Beams were going down into the WSA.
Hey, we are all in the limo and we're on...
The operator in the tower would verify that, and several of us.
So they were looking for fissile material.
I hear the same question over and over. If UFOs are real, then surely someone in the know would be talking.
So what time are we actually going on the air?
I think 6 o'clock, you guys.
Hey, Chris. Yes, we need everything.
Good evening. A historic occasion will take place in Washington on Monday. Former high-level government employees, military officials, and pilots from all over the world will come together. They'll discuss their own UFO sightings and encounters, and they'll do it at the National Press Club in the nation's capital. This group has gathered together to call on the United States government to take an active role in investigating cases involving unidentified flying objects. James Fox, will you be there Monday too?
Absolutely, yes. To establish the fact that the phenomenon is real and it's happening worldwide.
Fife, are we now saying that the United States is taking this seriously, or is this just an event?
I think the United States is taking it seriously, and they need to. It's long overdue.
And you're going to moderate it, right?
I'm going to moderate it. I'm Fife Symington. In 1997, during my second term as governor of Arizona, I saw something that defied logic and challenged my reality.
Before this event, I met with the governor at his home to find out why he ridiculed the sighting.
We were in the middle of investigating it and just couldn't get any answers. Paralleling that activity was this almost hysterical environment that was building, the hysteria.
The governor told me what was actually going on behind the scenes.
And we called Luke Air Force Base, and we called the FAA, and I called various touch base with people. I called my general at the National Guard. Nobody had an explanation. People just sort of said, well, we just don't know what it is.
Phoenix Councilwoman Frances Barwood was one of the only elected representatives willing to push for an investigation.
I would have thought that they would have wanted to do an investigation, but apparently they would rather ignore it. I don't know why.
At Barwood's request, Senator John McCain looked into the matter personally.
We asked the Air Force to look into it, and this was the first response that we've gotten. We're going to go back and ask them to look at it again.
Senator McCain wrote letters to both the National Archives and the Air Force. Both claimed not to have jurisdiction over such matters.
I was kind of surprised at that response. But there are people who said they saw things, and whenever that happens, they deserve at least an investigation, it seems to me.
The Air Force explanation eventually provided to Senator McCain was military flares dropped from A-10 Warthogs between 9:30 and 10 p.m.
Oh my God! Oh.
I hit pay dirt, finally.
According to some analysts, these lights captured on film were flares.
Well, that is a totally different configuration than we've ever seen before.
Yep.
But this does not account for the large boomerang-shaped object seen by the governor and hundreds, possibly thousands of others across the state beginning several hours earlier.
I mean, it clearly had a shape to it, and a big shape, and it was a constant shape. And you can't control flares that way. There's just no way they were flares.
Why can't they tell us? I mean, what's it going to hurt? I would like for them to come out and say, that's top secret, and we're not going to tell you what it was.
The V formation.
I was only able to find one video taken of the earlier sightings.
Over a period of somewhere between.
I was, however, given this video taken by an Army colonel a few years earlier. It reminds me of what Arizona witnesses described seeing.
There's no sound, and it's not planes flying in formation. I don't hear anything, do you?
No, I don't hear anything. What in the hell is that?
Can you see the stars? Can you see through it? Right behind it.
Yeah, I see it now.
And it's that's not planes flying in formation behind it either. It's another triangle.
What would you say to the people about it? I'd say I saw an unidentified flying object of massive proportions float over the city of Phoenix and Scottsdale, and I don't have the damnedest clue what it was.
I saw it. It was over my house. I saw it for 5 minutes. It wasn't something that was a flash that I only saw for a second. Could it have been? I know what I saw. And I get very upset, and I was wondering why they won't find out what it was.
Governor Symington, I am Bill Burns from the History Channel. Just a quick question. When you were giving your press conference back in Phoenix, were there any external pressures on you to diffuse the situation in the way you did, or did anyone instruct you not to comment on the truth of what was happening in Phoenix?
Well, the only external pressure, and it was significant, was the fact that there was just this massive public reaction to the lights over Phoenix. I mean, we've just being inundated by the press and people coming into my office saying this thing is just reaching heights of hysteria and concern. I'd never seen that before. I mean, I've been in office for quite a while, and I'd never seen kind of that reaction. And so three of us sort of sat down at the end and decided to try to lighten the mood a little bit. Well, I'd like now to set the record straight. I never meant to ridicule anyone. My office did make inquiries as to the origin of the craft, but to this day they remain unanswered. I still don't know what it was. As a pilot and a former Air Force officer, I can definitively say that this craft did not resemble any man-made object that I'd ever seen. Well, I now know that I'm not alone in witnessing something extraordinary. That's the bottom line. There are many high-ranking military, aviation, and government officials, many of whom are here today, who share my concerns. Some of them have truly exceptional stories to tell.
Hundreds of people saw a majestic triangular craft with a span of approximately 120 feet. Powerful beaming spotlights moving very slowly without making any significant noise, but in several cases accelerating to very high speeds.
Physical traces on the ground from the craft were confirmed by the local police. The official conclusion of Japan in 1979 was that about 15% of the cases remained unidentified after careful analysis by our experts.
Fue entonces que me acerqué a 100 metros del objeto. Tenía unos 10 metros de diámetro, estaba como esmaltado con una cúpula de color crema sobre una base metálica ancha y circular. No tenía motores, ni escapes, ni ventanas, ni alas o antenas. Carecía de todos los implementos típicos de un avión y sin ningún sistema visible de propulsión.
Lamentablemente, el tema relacionado con los ovnis se encuentra muy contaminado y con una importante cantidad de información falsa.
Most UFO sightings turned out to be misidentifications of things such as aircraft, satellites and meteors, but in around 5% of cases no explanation could be found.
Washington, D.C. is no stranger to this story.
Could these saucers be some kind of a secret weapon of ours? No. If they were, Air Materiel Command would be the first to know. How about a device from a foreign country? We know they're not. What is your opinion, Colonel?
The U.S. Air Force's involvement with UFOs started back in World War II when pilots reported being followed by luminous orbs. They were nicknamed Foo Fighters. By 1947, flying saucer sightings were getting national coverage.
They flew like erratically, like a saucer would if you skipped it across the water.
According to this memo titled Opinion Concerning Flying Discs by General Nathan Twining, the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious.
No, it just come up like that and then it tipped and just, I mean, really went. It didn't have no smoke, no motor, just the wind. It went fast. I've never seen anything go so fast in my life as that thing went. Yeah.
The sightings over Washington in July 1952 were just part of one of the biggest and most impressive UFO waves in all UFO history.
This incident was witnessed by the public, military pilots, and air traffic control.
Pilots went aloft. They saw a luminous glowing object out in front of them right where the radar indicated it to be. So you had ground radar, airborne radar, and the pilots' visual sightings.
Look magazine reported that radar operators at Washington National Airport tracked UFOs at speeds up to 7,000 miles per hour.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
Major General Samford, who was the Director of Information of the Air Force, called a press conference which was characterized at the time as being the largest press conference since World War II.
The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. There have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve.
Did the Joint Chiefs of Staff talk to you or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have
what
anything
they
on the
see.
subject, sir?
No, I haven't anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on, flying saucers.
There were senior Air Force generals convinced that we had interplanetary visitors. And they were setting the policy. And they were behind the Life magazine article of, I believe, April 1952, which was titled, "Do We Have Interplanetary Visitors?" You read the story, the answer obviously was yes.
With the cooperation of the United States Air Force, Life magazine conducted an exhaustive one-year study. Out of a number of conclusions, this one caught my eye. No power plant known or projected on Earth could account for the performance of these devices.
Dick Calderhose is a journalist and a qualified pilot. He saw what he believed to be a flying saucer.
It was a flight from Winnipeg to Vancouver in jet aircraft. We were fairly high, about 37,000 feet, coming up in the mountains just about sunset. This unexplained light was, or disc-shaped object was down in the darkness. Yeah. So I just happened to have a camera with me and we took a picture.
In my opinion, I think they were worried that it would panic the public if they knew that someone had vehicles that had this kind of performance way back right after World War II, period of time. So they started telling lies about it.
Dr. J. Allen Hynek investigated UFOs for the United States Air Force for over 22 years. The most well-known of these investigations was Project Blue Book.
Where media is not...
In this 1979 interview, Dr. Hynek revealed why the Air Force changed its public position.
They were strongly guided by the CIA, because the CIA was not concerned so much with UFOs as they were with UFO reports. They were afraid, actually, that if another nation wanted to perpetrate another Pearl Harbor, that if their agents spawned a bunch of false flying saucer stories that might clog the military wires, as actually happened in 1952. So they devised the so-called Robertson panel, of which I was an associate member at the time. A very prestigious panel. I was one of the lower-ranking ones. They had Nobel Prize winners and whatnot on it. But at any rate, they handed down the dictum, which then became sort of the unwritten law of the Air Force: don't rock the boat, play it down, cool it, don't get the public excited.
What is your answer to the people who are sure there are spaceships and they say that you and the Air Force are in cahoots? Well, first of all, this business about being in cahoots is just simply a downright falsehood.
And I know, having been in Blue Book for nearly 20 years, that whenever an interesting case came up, the very last thing in the world they would do is to notify the media. And when the media themselves found out something, the Air Force did its best to play it down. It's called it a balloon, called it a star, called it...
Balloons, meteors, satellites, aircraft seen with the sun glinting off of them, and birds.
Our critics continually charge that the United States Air Force is withholding information from the general public on this subject. This is absolutely untrue.
And there is nothing in the records which would indicate that we have been visited by any advanced civilization.
There's nothing to hide.
There's nothing to hide at all.
Good evening. Reports of flying saucers are nothing new.
When it got to the top of the trees, it stopped.
It looked like a round disc.
Residents of the area saw it. The police saw it. Sergeant Newell Schneider of the Sheriff's Office remembered it well enough to draw it.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is. The Air Force sent its chief scientific consultant on UFOs, Professor J. Allen Hynek, to check the Michigan sightings.
A little bit of swamp light appears here. It goes out. Another one appears over here. That goes out then. But the illusion, as viewed from a distance, is that the objects have moved back and forth.
The citizens of Michigan didn't buy it and asked then-Congressman Gerald Ford to investigate.
Mr. Ford, what about flying saucers? You've had some in Michigan in the past week. Do you really believe in flying saucers? You've called for a congressional investigation.
Dave, we've had several incidents in Michigan in the last week. Incidents that many reliable, good citizens felt were sufficient to justify some action by our government, and not the kind of flippant answer that was given by the Air Force where they passed it off as a swamp gas.
Now, this is not an attack on the Air Force spokesman or the project spokesman. They are simply following orders to explain away all UFO sightings as quickly as possible when they become public and deny that UFOs really exist.
Scientists were being misled, even as the public was being misled. And to this day, most scientists have no inkling of the serious hardcore evidence, because now it's all treated like a tabloid subject.
Are you sorry now that you did tell people what you saw?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry because not that it's not the truth, but it's just the idea, the reaction of the people. They think you're a nut. Tell you the truth, that's just what they figure you are. And I'm not going to take it no more. I don't want nobody down in here. I just leave me alone. And if the thing lands right there by that pump, I'd never say a word.
10 years ago, in 1969, they closed Blue Book, and I thought for a while that maybe this was finally going to be over. But since that time, we've had about 25,000 more UFO reports.
Many of the hundreds of people reporting the sightings believe they've all seen the same object.
It's called the Hudson Valley UFO.
Stop playing.
I'm going to tell you something, honey. I don't know what the hell it is. It moved in a very straight line, very slowly. There was absolutely no noise.
There was not a sound.
And it moved smoothly?
Very smoothly, almost like it was floating. It was silent, it was hovering. I mean, airplanes can't hover.
Do you believe in UFOs?
Personally, no, sir.
How do you know that you're not being used? How do you know that you know the full story when you
My name is Gary Tuckman with CNN, and this question's for the governor and Mr. Callahan. This really is a government that doesn't mind scaring us. We still have orange alerts and red alerts, and they scare us all the time. It keeps people in work. So I'm wondering why you think, and you just state that that's the reason and that's it. Is that really the motivation for a government that doesn't mind scaring us?
If these phenomena are as technologically advanced as they appear to be, then one could say that we're completely vulnerable as a civilization. And that's, to some people, that might be horrifying. And I'm just speculating on that feeling of vulnerability. And so a lot of people like to say, well, you know, we're not vulnerable. That's just not true. That didn't happen. And they shut it out of their minds.
Because try.
Well, that's something.
I know what companies are from.
Well, we could do a little round table introduction then, if you know, because you know, a few of us have only just met and things like that.
Yeah, we met today already, but extensively.
After the program, last evening, they did the survey on the internet. And they asked people, do you believe in UFOs? What were the results, 75 or 80%? 83% said yes.
So you have a chance, yeah?
We have a chance. An opening.
Hey!
You guys are all here?
We were talking bad.
Really?
Someone said to be here for 6:30.
I think 6:30 is the right time.
We've had a crate of
I got here, no one
wine.
was here yet, so I came back.
The night before our big event at the National Press Club, we all met for dinner.
Certainly one of the people that I spoke to was a meteorological officer.
My dream was coming true. Here I was, surrounded by credible people who were about to share incredible stories.
So these are reliable witnesses.
Yeah. There were generals, pilots, physicists, an FAA official, an Air Force colonel. I'd never been in a room full of so many people of this caliber comfortably talking about the existence of UFOs. We were enjoying our time together. It was remarkable how everyone had something extraordinary in common. There was a mutual understanding, and I got some answers to some big questions.
Why did the French government do what they did by releasing the UFO files just recently?
It took 15 years to convince to do something.
Despite the public position of the US government, somebody, whether it was on an official or a sort of back-channel basis, but somebody most definitely was looking into the UFO phenomenon.
If you're not capable to identify whatever flies around, there is something wrong.
Could you say something very quickly? One of the things I always remember you talking about was when you'd be at a cocktail party and the subject would come up with UFOs, and you sat with one on the ground for 45 minutes and you'd bite your tongue. What was that like?
It was difficult. But you know, in some ways there was some kind of satisfaction involved there. And they're talking about stuff, the what if. And I knew.